I'd like to welcome everybody then to the August 3rd, 2020 meeting of the Newmarket Municipal Budget Committee. This is the meeting that had originally been scheduled for July 27th, but had to be postponed due to some space constraints at the high school. We are meeting remotely this time, and as always, I'd like to start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You know, one more try, we'd probably really nail that. All right, so we are doing a remote meeting, as I mentioned, so I've actually cribbed a few of Mike's reductions in the meeting notice from the last school board meeting, but due to the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis and in accordance with Governor Sununu's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. There is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are A, providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing the Zoom platform for this electronic meeting. All members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the Zoom platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing area code 646-558-8656 and access code 911-2775-9480. B, providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of how to access the meeting using Zoom, and instructions are provided on the Town of Newmarket's website at www.newmarketnh.gov. C, providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anybody has a problem with access, please call area code 602-292-1221. And D, adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. So, as is the correct practice, we will begin with roll call attendance. As I call your name, please state that you are present, and also either state that you're alone or name anybody who might be with you as required. Roger Cady. You're on mute, Roger.
Present alone.
Jeff Robb.
Present and alone.
Councilor Dumont.
I am present and I am alone.
Joe LaMattina.
Present and alone.
Rob Ortons.
I'm presently alone.
John Baldy.
Present and alone.
Mike Kennison.
Present and alone.
Mike LaBranch.
Present and alone.
We also have some invited guests for the meeting. Jana Mellon.
Present and alone.
Steve Fournier.
Present and alone.
And Dave Jack.
Present and alone.
And just for everyone's clarification, there was no particular order that I went through that. I just went in the order that people appear on the grid on my screen. Moving along, our first order of business is to approve the minutes of the June 29th, 2020 meeting, the last remote meeting that we had. I'd appreciate a motion to approve the minutes from the June 29th meeting.
I so move.
Thank you, Roger.
Second.
I think I heard Joe by a slight margin. So I'll open it up. I had two things that I noticed on page 2 of the minutes. The first one being in line 64. I think that should read "and property taxes are coming in now," as opposed to "an property taxes." The second thing that I noticed was on row 81. I think "RCing" should be 2 words instead of a single word. Did anybody else have any edits or comments or anything they observed in the minutes?
Yeah, this is Joe. I did. On line 127, perhaps Dave can help us with this. What should be after after 125, 125 comma? It kind of like just kind of like leaves off there.
I'm not looking at the minutes, Joe, at this point. Can you give me a little bit more?
Yeah, let me find them. Dang it.
Yeah, I'm looking at them, Joe. I'm not, at least on my copy, the sentence does continue after 125.
Yeah, but so it says, Mr. Jack said the loan is still gaining interest and the amount is somewhere around $850,000. Of that, all but 125,000, comma, and he would be have a better number. All but 125,000.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Do you want me to complete that piece?
Yeah, if you could just give Dan some words to
So
put in.
so the intent of that is there was at the time we reported that there was we estimated approximately out of all the bond interest that was not spoken for, there would be in excess of 125,000 left over that would come back to help reduce additional revenue to reduce taxation as we go into next year. I'll have an updated figure in the report I give tonight.
Yeah, but okay, so so basically, if he just says of that, all but 125,000 is spoken for, right?
Yes,
Is that okay?
Is not spoken for.
is not spoken for. 100, all but 125,000. Yes.
Right.
So
So however you want to word it. Dan.
another way to phrase it, maybe all but 125,000 is available to reduce taxes.
Yep.
Okay, understanding that we'll have updated figures tonight, but for the minutes of last time. Any other edits or?
Dan, let me ask real quick. I thought
Yeah.
I had that backwards. I thought that only 125,000 was left after warrant articles, because we had that big warrant article for purchases that were left over.
Jeff is right. I think Danny just misstated. Only 125,000 is left to reduce taxes.
Yes.
Okay, all right, good. Thank you for clarifying. So for Patricia, when you listen to this, row, in my document, it's row 126 and should read, Mr. Jack said that the loan is still gaining interest and the amount is somewhere around 850,000, comma, all of that but 125,000 is spoken for, comma, and then the sentence continues. Any other edits? Hearing none, let's do a roll call vote to approve the minutes as amended. Roger Cady,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Jeff Robb,
Aye.
Councilor Dumont,
Aye.
Joe Lamatina,
Aye.
Rob Ortons,
Aye.
Mike Kennison,
Aye.
John Baldy,
Aye.
Mike LaBranch,
Aye.
and Eric Wagode, by virtue of being absent, will be abstaining, I guess. All right, next on the agenda, under new business, Steve Fournier, the town manager, is here to go over, everybody received the summary of town finances through June 30th, the end of the fiscal year, and I've asked Steve to join us to give us a quick overview of where we've ended up. So Steve, please take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I get into it, I just want to remind everybody, these are unaudited figures. There's a good chance these will change once the auditors come in. So these are just the end of year unaudited figures. So at the end of June, end of the fiscal year, we expended 95% of the general fund budget with an unaudited amount of $362,484 remaining in the budget. There is going to be a correction that we've already are aware of for a bill for workers' compensation. That was about $120,000. That's because they didn't bill us, and we do need to pay the bill. We were kind of looked at it twice at the end of the year, like there's an error there. That being said, we are much better off than last year. Last year, we came in probably just about $20,000 under budget, and that was extremely tight. On the revenue side, we did see a slight increase on the general fund revenues, even though through the pandemic, motor vehicle registrations are actually up about $45,000 over last year and $151,225 over the budgeted amount. The one thing that I don't think I'd be surprised about would be building permits did not meet budget, under about $1,300. So not a lot, but it's still something. And it's still, it's a decrease of what we collected last year of $5,500. Plain and simple, people weren't building things during the pandemic. We lost a number of months of revenue there. Looking at the budget, one of the areas that we're concerned about, because we continue to see increase in cost, is solid waste. Solid waste figures are going, collection fees are going higher, and we're losing revenue on the recycling side. There's no market any longer for recycling. You've probably heard some municipalities have actually stopped recycling, one of which is our neighboring community of Newfields. What we need to look at is, which is I'm giving as a courtesy, but it's a council policy, is the cost of our pay-as-you-throw bag system. We have not updated it in a number of years, we believe 2008. And in comparison to other Seacoast municipalities, we're actually pretty low with our small bags at $1.15 and a large bag at $2.25. In comparison, Raymond is $3.25 for a small one and $4.25 for a large. Somersworth's $1.45 for a small and $2 for a large. Dover is $2.34 for a small and $3.91 for a large. And Exeter is $1.25 and $2.50 for a large. Dover just redid theirs, and I know the other cities and towns are looking at theirs as well. Other than that, we continue to work on the pandemic, trying to get as much CARES funds as possible to offset our operations. We also we'll be having additional materials provided to us by the state, so it will not affect our budgets for the upcoming elections. We just got a call today of when we can pick those pieces of PPE up. So we'll be having that as well. So that's really all we have had the last month. If there's any questions, more than willing to answer.
So I have so on the solid waste, the line recycling contract, is that the bags? What is that recycling contract?
That is correct. There's two. There's under the revenue where it says, let me pull that up. It says
under the expenses.
Right. We only collected 203,000. We're anticipating somewhere about 270 for the bags, but we had some other things like when we charge at the transfer station. So what we're doing is actually doing better accounting now. We're separate. Before it wasn't separating, now it is. So yes, we did. We did not make what we thought we would on that side this year. And what we should be doing is it should be like a revolving fund, like water and sewer or an enterprise fund. Whatever we should be collecting should be going back to offset it. We will not get there. It's not possible with the amount of money that we have for solid waste. But we need to do something before we start hemorrhaging funds to cover it.
So what I'm talking about on page 11 under the expenses, where you had budgeted 225,000 and you've expended 298.
That's hauling fees.
Okay, so hauling fees have gone up. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, we signed a 1-year agreement with Casella instead of going out to bid, just because it was right about the time everything was starting to happen, and we decided it wasn't beneficial to try to go out to bid not knowing what the market was going to be. So they agreed to a 1-year agreement that will be going out to bid shortly. One thing I can also say is that we used to do it as a tri-town initiative with Stratham and Newfields. Newfields decided to go on their own and leave us, our group, for that one. However, we are charging Newfields $5 a bucket for people who want to recycle. They use our facilities and they drive over and use our recycling facilities.
Steve, if the council, I guess, decides to go in the direction of increasing the bag fees, which sounds like it's fairly cost justified, any thought to maybe creating an outlet where people could buy bags directly from the town as opposed to from retailers? And you know, if we're going to have to go up on cost, it would be nice for people to avoid paying the markup. And candidly, I'd rather the town have the money than Market Basket or Irving.
You can buy bags from us currently. You can buy them in the town clerk's office, or when it's open, the DPW.
Well, yeah,
until we're open, we can't be in that. We can't be in that business at this point in time.
I see. Okay, Councilor Dumont.
Dan, forgive me, I'm just curious. Are you suggesting that if taxpayers could only get their bags from town hall, that we'd be better off for that? Or I guess.
No, I didn't say if they
I'm just
only
curious.
did. It would just be nice. You know, I think, you know, what I've observed personally, and I've heard others say this, is that the markup that you pay depending on where you go varies pretty widely. Yeah, anecdotally, I think Irving is marking them up somewhere in the $2 range. Market Basket is probably pretty close to being flat to cost. You know,
We've heard.
Steve, sorry.
Yeah, we've heard the same. But on our side, it's the market. You know, that's
Yeah.
what they can do. They buy it off us at the flat fee, and they can resell it at whatever amount they feel covers their costs.
Yep, fair enough. The other question I had looking at, so the revenue side, it looks like we just sort of budgeted big picture for rec, for solid waste, but then we're actually splitting out the actual revenues into finer granularity. Is that the right way to read this, Steve?
Exactly. We're trying to have a better accounting in general, you know, so we can report to you what we have for where we're getting our funds for recreation. You're right. It was sort of a general, okay, everything in the rec revolving. We knew where it was coming from, but we wanted to be able to report it better. With the new system, we are doing that.
All right. Well, now you've thrown a shiny object in front of me, so that was your first mistake.
Okay.
89 grand for receipts at the transfer station. Is that historically typical? I swear, I've never seen that number that large in this context, I don't think.
Yeah, and I'd have to double check that. Let me double check that one.
Wonderful if true, I guess.
Of course, I had a bunch of questions, and this is typically our vacation time for a lot of department heads, so I wasn't able to get that.
Okay.
Numbers.
Other questions from the committee?
Yeah, what was I gonna say? So overall, you had an overall surplus of roughly $400 and some thousand, then minus now the 120. Is there any large expenditures that have been put off to next year? Or any large expenditures that have been put off to next year?
We can't actually put large expenditures off for one year to another if we have it in the budget. Since we budget on a gross basis, we only can spend what we have appropriated. So no, not really. Most of the savings were due to savings in insurances, as well as some vacant positions in police and the police department.
Right, I saw that.
Yeah, it wasn't through putting off any expenditures.
Okay, cool. All right, so we're not carrying over some kind of a
No, not,
Okay.
I mean, there's some people carrying some things, but nothing huge.
So now this surplus $300,000, whatever it is, goes back into the general fund for next year. Is that correct?
Balance.
And reduces by a few pennies, I guess, the overall taxes for the town.
It would be, well, the value of the town's about $1 billion, so it'd be about 50 cents.
Mhm.
But we also need to make sure that our fund balance is healthy. And last year we were close. We've been using a lot of fund balance over the last few years to do one-time projects and contribution to capital reserve funds that we weren't able to do this past year due to the fact that we didn't have a healthy fund balance. We've been budgeting to the bone, as I think a lot of budget committee members are aware, for the last few years. So this will help replenish that. The other thing we have to consider is if the pandemic flares up again, we need to make sure we have money in there in case we have some emergency expenses, not just reduction in expenses. While we think we should be okay, we also have to follow what's going on with the feds and the state, that if we don't get additional revenues, remember, none of this care monies can go to offsetting the revenues that we've lost and if we lose things in taxation. So that's what we're worried about.
But what do you have for a fund balance? I don't see it. I thought there was about 250,000. No,
How much?
I thought there was like 250,000
Oh no, it's about 5.5 million.
in a fund balance.
Yes, we have to keep that amount in fund balance. Fund balance isn't cash on hand.
Yeah, Steve, could you just define the term fund balance quickly? Because I think there may be a little confusion as to what that means.
Balance isn't cash on hand. It's money that the auditors determine that you take all of our liabilities, and after the budget, the difference there, quote unquote, goes into fund balance. The DRA recommends that in our policy says that we must keep between 5 and 10% of the school, the town, and the county appropriations in there. The reasoning is this county and the school do not collect taxes, we do. So we need to make sure that if the school and the county need to receive their funds, that we have somewhere to go. If we needed to dip into there, we need to actually go to the Department of Revenue Administration to receive permission to do so. So people call it surplus. It's not really surplus because it's not cash on hand.
5% would be around $1.5 million.
Yeah, we're higher than that.
Did you say 23 million?
No. I didn't say 23. I don't have all the numbers in front of me. Again, it's the combined budgets, what we have to appropriate for the county, our portion of the county, the schools, and the town. And then we have to take between 5 and 10% of that number and keep it in fund balance. Usually the county, we have to pay about $750,000 to $800,000 for appropriations, and the school is the school.
And the amount in the fund balance now is,
I'm estimating, if I remember correctly, it was about 5.5.
okay, so that's considerably more than 10%.
No,
No, Steve, you mean about 500,000, correct?
no, I don't have those in front of me. I will get those figures because I want to make sure I have the numbers in front of me.
Fair enough. Other questions on the town financial report?
I have a question with regards to police. The under budget, as I understand it, Steve, is due to a shortage of manpower.
Yep.
And is that we in the new budget have authorized additional manpower, and it sounds like we can't even hire to the old budget?
No, no, we have officers, the position, we have one vacancy now with a resignation, and we have one vacancy due to the new budget as of July 1st. This was due to there were some vacancies, but once you hire a police officer, they don't start day one. They have to go to the academy, and there's other associated costs that there are savings. Namely, it's usually overtime and some training and the salary itself. So you may have had a vacant position from, say, I'll do it for the fiscal year, July to September. So you save a good chunk of money on that and their benefits on that situation. And then once you fill it, once they come in, that's when you can, we're not having a difficult time hiring individuals whatsoever in Newmarket.
Well, 140,000 sounds like more than 3 months of an officer.
Again, I don't have the figure in front of me, but I'll find out. We do not have a hard time. We actually, since I've been in Newmarket, the number of police officers that have actually resigned, not to go somewhere else, not to resign due to issues. One, we've never had a resign due to issues. Most have gone to better their career, and that is 2. The other large portion are retirements. We had a retirement last year, and then this just reminded me. So we are also hiring a police officer at a different salary than what the retired individual had. So there's savings there as well. But no, compared to other municipalities our size, especially in our region, our turnover is very low.
Okay.
Zach?
Probably worth pointing out that Chief True has mentioned on several occasions how happy his police force is working in this town. We should be very thankful that they're so willing to stay.
Exactly.
Other questions for Steve while we're going over the financial report?
The finance overage is due to contract labor.
I'm sorry?
The overage in the finance, on the finance line?
Yeah. That's because we needed, the superintendent of schools decided to hire a business administrator, and we separated the shared position. So the town had to hire what we did, we went with a contracted position for most of the year through MRI. So yes, we had additional costs there, because before we were only paying about 30% of a salary for a finance director. So that was an unbudgeted position. We were able to transfer some money from there, from the IT director, because we went from a in-house full-time staff member to a contracted position.
So have you now hired a full-time
Yep.
finance administrator?
He was the contracted individual. It was sort of like a tryout, and we were very happy with the situation. So we brought him on as a staff person. To be honest, this will probably be one of my last meetings until budget time, as he'll be taking over more with the budget committee, since he's the finance director and the IT director.
Thank you.
Shaping the finance department.
Other questions with regard to the finances? All right, hearing no others, and Steve covered the fund balance section. I guess as we should probably get in the habit of doing every meeting, we'll touch quickly any updates, anything related to COVID that you see coming or have impacted us?
Yeah, we're looking at the numbers, and I've got a presentation for the council on Wednesday. Newmarket's done very well as it relates to the percentage of infections in the community. Population of Newmarket is estimated at about 9,500 people. Currently, the total number of the percent of the population that has been infected is 0.14%. 13 people have had COVID since the beginning of the pandemic. Around the seacoast, which I compared us to, the highest community was Portsmouth, and it's not even a half a percentage point, with 89 people in that community. So the percentage of the community was still low. But, that's what tested, that's what we know has happened. Some people may be asymptomatic. They may just not have been tested and just stayed home thinking they had the flu and said that we can just do it on their own. Statewide, that number for those who have been infected, percentage of their population, is 0.48%. And the United States, as of last week, was 1.31% of the population had been infected. So we are just looking at that. So we're doing a good job in Newmarket. And the other part is, which I don't think anybody was surprised, that we had a significant increase in unemployment, spiked in late March and then started dropping come about May. And it was, for example, the last year in June, the unemployment rate was about 2%, and now it's about 10% in Newmarket. So that's a significant increase. So that's just some things that we're looking at. And the other thing we are preparing for is the second surge. If that does happen, looking at late fall, early winter, usually around flu season, then people start getting locked back in their homes, in buildings, that's a significant thing. And that the town's emergency management team is reviewing what we have, what we learned from the first one, and what we can take from that and do better in the second, if the second time happens.
All right. Other questions for Steve before we cut him loose to enjoy the rest of his evening? Going once, going twice. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Next item on the agenda is to speak with the school district. I know Dr. Givens is on vacation, so she's not available to join us. We have Jana Mellon. Again, I think Roger started with this, but Jana, welcome. It's nice to meet you face to face, sort of.
As
well
it is
as
now.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. Dave and I kind of are going to tag team this tonight. We, as you know, I started July 1st, so most of the goose was already cooked by the time I got here, and Dave had a good handle on those finances.
Continues to gain interest. Obviously not at the same rate as when you had the full bond proceeds in the bank before you had expended any of them. So the revenue picture is very, very good for FY20. The expenditures is equally as good. We're at the time that I gave this to the school board, we were projecting $905,000 of balance left. It's actually, if you down at the board meeting, we actually added another $35,000. It would be $940,603 is what we have for an unexpended balance. And you probably ask and say, well, why do you have a pretty significant amount of money left? Well, COVID-19 meant that we didn't do business the same after March the 15th or thereabouts. We shut down pieces. As you can see, we had said that there's salaries, money's left in salaries of about $362,000. That's primarily comes from positions that were never filled. In addition, substitutes accounts added a lot. In the world of education, substitutes, the substitute account usually gets heavily used from March to the end of the year. That's the heavy usage time. Obviously, this year it didn't happen. We had monies left there. The other piece was that during this would have taken place at least a year ago during negotiation, collective bargaining unit, you changed health plans. By the time you had budgeted and then negotiated it, it ended up that you had $175,000 that went unused in that, simply because you negotiated a plan that had additional contributions from the employee. And in addition, I think it costs less. So that's a pretty significant amount of money. It certainly bodes well this year. The other piece, transportation, we didn't transport at the end of the year, and there were some additional tuitions in the special education that we didn't use. These were, in one case, a fairly sizable tuition where the child had aged out and no longer with the institution, so we saved that tuition. And then there were other purchase services. We overexpended in a number of areas, particularly around technology and equipment, because With COVID-19, we had to do a lot of additional spending for Chromebooks, for furniture, equipment, if you will, in anticipation as to moving forward and how we're going to address that. The long and the short of it is you have about, right now, you're looking at about $1.1 million. And I'm going to do the same, not do the same thing, but remind committee that these are unaudited figures. This is simply something that's done. The good news is we had our auditors in this past week. They have all the information. They will have figures in the month of August that are, we'll have final figures as far as what the unassigned fund balance will be. So what you're seeing tonight are just some of the pieces that they will be working with. But before the end of August, we obviously will have all those numbers because we need that to submit our reports, our end of the year reports, and in effect be prepared for when you do a tax rate setting sometime in October. So with the $1.1 million, that is a combination of the revenues, the excess revenues you have, and anything that's unexpended. You also had a warrant article 8, which was trust fund that was voted on in March that said that if the balance was available, you had $50,000 that you would take from the unassigned balance to put into that particular trust fund. So we've recognized that as well. I guess to summarize this very quickly is this is a very unusual year. You have more monies, if you will, to that are going to be directed to reducing the tax assessment, and they won't probably be replicated a year down the road. This is a very unusual time, so we're expenditures that we didn't make just because we didn't utilize them, and there were a number of other factors here. So I know that last year, I think the unassigned fund balance that was used to set the tax rate was somewhere around $538,000. So this is simply going to be a greater amount in a year that is needed. But I would remind you that you probably won't be able to replicate this year after year. These are one-time things that occur. So when we look at budgets, we'd like to have revenues that are stabilized that we can depend on year after year. And I don't think that's what you're seeing here. Some of the pieces that will be used to set the tax rate will simply be as a derivative of this particular year and probably will not occur again. So that's a little bit. I know if you have any questions, please ask. The school board has reviewed this, and again, our auditors have been in and are working with all of our financials at this point. And as I said, we'll have a very good idea, probably a final number in the latter part of August.
I guess the first thing that occurs to me, so you spoke about the savings from the fact that we didn't need to use substitutes from the middle of March onward. I mean, is that because the teachers just didn't get sick or take time off? Or did the teachers get sick and take time off at a relatively normal rate and we just didn't fill those instructional hours with substitutes? Can you explain a little what the mechanism was there?
Well, from March on, we went into remote learning.
Right.
A whole different ballgame.
Mm-hmm.
Substitutes, just a different way the substitute accounts were used and so forth. So there was, I would tell you that very little was used in the substitute account just by the mere demeanor of how we delivered services from that point on. I mean, everybody operated remotely. I think we had one long-term situation where a teacher was actually out and wasn't available for a duration, so that there was some monies used there. But it's not the daily rate where if you are available for work, we did not experience the same vacancies or sick days that we would experience in a normal year when you come on site.
All right. So I guess I'm just looking to make sure that we're not going to have a lagging effect here that we fail to acknowledge. I mean, I know in much of the world, a lot of people canceled their vacation plans for the spring for perfectly obvious reasons. I don't remember off the top of my head what the school district's policy on rolling over vacation time is for professional staff, but to the extent we didn't spend that money on substitutes because teachers didn't cancel their vacations because really there was no place to go, are we rolling over a big liability into future years that we're not acknowledging?
I can speak to that if you don't mind, because I have been looking at that as part of what the audit is. Teachers don't earn vacation, Dan. Their vacations align with the school district. They're paid for a set number of days, and vacation is not part of that. So there's, for all of our teaching staff, excuse me, our professional teaching staff, there is no vacation that they would be owed. They are awarded certain sick days, but that's per policy, and there's a cap on that. So as part of the audit every year, we have to present to our auditors a figure for uncompensated absences, which will show up as a liability on our balance statement. But because of the fact that most of our all of our teachers and many of our paraprofessionals, neither of those two groups of individuals have vacation time per se. It's really only your administrators, your year-round support staff, and your custodians.
All right. So in general terms, then this liability that we carry on the school district's balance sheet for unused sick time or unused vacation time of the administrators, are we coming out of the year with that balance at what we call an historically abnormally high level?
I don't think that you're going to see much of a difference. And the reason is your support staff still worked, most of them during COVID-19. The custodian staff, they still worked. If they took the vacation, they took it. And your administrators all worked as well. No, there was no, we didn't stop working during COVID-19.
No, I mean, I understand that. I think most people in the world who have the option to work like you could go to the beach. So my question is kind of more in the opposite direction. Is there some amount of paid time off that ordinarily would have been taken that is now riding on the books as a liability?
I don't believe that it's going to be any higher than it's ever been in the past, because we don't allow vacation generally to roll. We allow certain other kinds. Like I said, you're allowed to roll sick time. Personal days don't roll. Professional days don't roll. And vacation days typically don't roll past the end of the year to a very extent. And for those people who may be grandfathered in, those number of days are capped. So I would not expect you to see a big jump between last year and this year with that regard.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Don't be shy. Wow, I'm not accustomed to seeing this group rendered speechless. Thank you, Dave.
Anytime there's a surplus in the school, I think everybody is shocked.
All right, Jana, if you'd like to move on to the more forward-looking part of your presentation, then we're all ears.
Sure, Dave. Thank you very much, Dave Jack.
Okay.
So forward, as I told you, it's a little bit fluid at the moment. There are long lead times on products. We just had the school board vote on the 23rd on our actual proposed plan moving forward. So prior to that time, we hadn't really been purchasing the PPE and the different things that we thought we needed for that model, because they hadn't decided what the model was going to be. So we've had a flurry in the last couple of weeks of purchasing to address the plan that the board has approved, at least at this time, with what we know. Some of that amount included additional devices for students in pre-K and K who had never had one-to-one devices before. So iPads for the younger folks and touchscreen Chromebooks, because We do fully anticipate that at some point during this year, even though our intention is to start back at the school, that we will have to return to remote instruction. And for those populations, we needed some way to do that, which wasn't present last year. So those types of things have been purchased. Signage is another issue. We have to buy some masks, gloves, disinfecting equipment. Our buses are going to be prioritized with a month-long disinfectant agent because we aren't able to provide sanitizer to students on the bus due to slip hazards and per the regulations of the bus company. So we have some additional costs with that. All told, I can tell you what, we've put quite a bit out the door, but the other side of that coin is that we also will be getting certain amounts reimbursed. So for example, we have some grant funds that came through the CARES Act, roughly $108,000. And that is something that's reimbursed after you expend. So some of that, I'm sure we will cap all of that coming back on this. We have another project that's available that I'm looking at now and I've applied for. It's actually a FEMA project under Homeland Security. It's a project DR 4516, catchy name, but it allows us to submit for certain other things like PPE, equipment, disinfecting solutions, that kind of thing. It's not as flexible as our CARES ESSER money, which is geared to schools. This is really more geared towards municipalities and first responders. Have a benefit to that. We don't get 100% reimbursement, but the way that they would do it is 75%, and we would be responsible for the 25%. So I hope to have a better number for the school board for their August meeting. It won't be final by any stretch, but a better number than I have tonight. I still today was putting purchase orders in, requisitions. I have some things lined up on my desk right now that I'm waiting for some proofs to come back to finalize this week. So I don't want to toss a number out there just yet, but what I can tell you is I think that we will be getting a good portion of what we are having to expend back, certainly not all. The flip side of that coin is we have some vacancies that we carried into the end of the year, or some employees who have left us. And we have hesitated to fill those positions since July because we weren't sure what our year was going to look like. So I know I have a couple of open custodial positions. We have some paraprofessional positions that are open that we hadn't filled because we weren't sure how we were going to proceed with that. So we will have some salaries also that even if we started filling those positions now, will remain unexpended for the year, presumably. So I guess the long and the short, I wish I could give you more detail tonight. I can kind of tell you where we're at, but I do hope to have some better information to present to the school, therefore to you folks towards the end of next month. Oh, well, this month, I should say, August.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah. Yeah, it's okay if I go ahead. I have a couple
Oh, absolutely.
Jana, well, welcome aboard.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you.
Careful what you wish for. Two things. You're ordering a number, or you're placing a bunch of orders for disinfectant and things like that. What happens if they don't come in on time? What's going to happen there?
You're speaking what keeps me up at 2 a.m. But I am making sure that I have multiple vendors that I'm working with, and I'm working with them to assure that lead time. We also are trying to make, how should I say, alternate but less acceptable plans. So for example, we've ordered some plexiglass table dividers because we have tables at our high school that seat 4, but we can't seat 4 unless we have like a cross-shaped divider across the table because they're not 6 feet. So we've placed that order, but as I just said, I have a little trouble sleeping at night when I think about like what happens if those don't come in. So I've been scouring the facilities website network where all the school facilities are on, and the Bedford district is actually going to donate to us 75 used elementary school desks They're not going to be ideal, but they're free. And so we're renting a rider truck to go down and pick them up so that in the event we don't have those dividers in at the time, we will have something that we can use for students to distance. So as I said, we're trying to look at all the options. We're trying to shake every bush and every tree to find what we can do. But right now, all of my vendors that I had placed orders with have promised delivery on or before August 31st. That's the latest delivery. Much of what I've ordered is expected to come in within the next 2 weeks. So I'll have a better sense then.
All right. Well, congratulations on your ingenuity here. Good luck to you. Another question that I have, it kind of sounded like at the town hall there with Dr. Givens, that there would be separate teachers for the remote sessions versus the teachers that are in class. Are we looking to hire, significant number of people to do that? How's that?
No, that's a really good question. But no, that's not the plan at this time. What we're doing is we actually sent out a survey to parents in the community to ask them what their plans are for their students. We asked them to submit that by August 3rd. We anticipated about 18% of our parents would want to keep their kids home, and the other bit would the rest would come to school. So based on how that split works out, we have some teachers who have submitted paperwork under the Americans with Disability Act for medical reasons, which is a bona fide reason. You may be familiar with that act, but school districts and any employer are able to consider accommodations for employees to allow them to perform their work. And one such accommodation can be remote work. So obviously we're giving priority to those teachers who have a medical reason that they need to be out of the building. They would become our remote teaching staff. Should other people request over and above those individuals, we'll have to figure out what to do about that. But at this time, we don't know how many remote positions we're going to need just yet. We are crunching those numbers. As I said, the survey just closed on Friday. So we are working on that right now. But no, we do not anticipate hiring additional teachers for the remote. We are looking to perhaps look at the certifications that our teachers have. And if we have somebody that's certified in multiple areas, we may shift some people around. Some teachers may not wind up teaching the grade level that they because we may need them to teach a different level. But those are all big discussions that are going on with our student learning and our teaching committees right now.
Okay. All right. Very good. Very good.
Yeah, you kind of touched on what my question was going to be. The survey, I think, was going to close today. I'm wondering if we've seen any surprises or anything unanticipated in the results.
I'll be honest with you, I have not looked at the survey results today. I was waiting until it closed, and there is another committee. I'm more the operational side of the house. So there was another committee that was kind of going to boil that down for us. And I don't know that they've had the chance to do that yet because it still is open right now. But certainly this week, we're going to be moving full steam ahead with instructional scheduling of students. We're probably going to have to reshuffle some classes, we know, some student rosters. And certainly based on our remote population of students, we'll have to designate teachers for that. One thing I can tell you is that our goal is to have no class bigger than 15 students if we can avoid it. And the reason for that is, as I told you before, we are fully anticipating that we will have to have a return to remote instruction at some point. And it's very difficult. Our feedback we got from our teachers last year is to do that interaction with all of those kids remotely is really hard if you have a classroom of 20 to 23 kids. There's just not enough hours in the day to conduct it that way. So that's kind of why we're trying to limit all the classes, whether you're in person and whether you're remote, to about 15. The benefit of that also is that we can allow to social distancing in most of our rooms by moving some things around, moving some furniture out. We can accommodate social distancing 6 feet apart in our existing classrooms for 15. So it's all part of our plan to kind of distance and seamlessly be able to go back to remote should that need, when and if that need arises.
Other questions? John?
One finer point to what you talked about earlier in terms of carryover vacation days, I do recall, I think it was earlier in the spring, that we, maybe May or June, that the board agreed to allow a certain number of support staff, custodians to carry over time because they just couldn't take their vacations by the close of the fiscal year. So that's like a one-time thing, but the general policy that we went to a few years ago is not to carry, because you want people to use their vacation days and not, just accumulate them. You want them to take those breaks. This year, and I recall we did it last year and maybe the year before that for certain folks because of the construction project and the fact that they really couldn't take their time and otherwise they'd lose it, and that wasn't really fair. So
well, like I said, what I've seen from last year to what I've seen that we calculated this year, it's not a significant difference in that amount that we're carrying. It probably has to do with the fact that you allowed some carryover because of the construction before. So I didn't go further back than that, but I did look at the 2 years. So
okay. John, thank you for waiting patiently.
No problem. Do you know if there's any implications if the approximately 80-20% of kids returning versus not returning, if those are skewed by a lot, say we have 75 decide to stay home and only 25% come in, are any of those kind of surprise numbers going to affect us in a significant financial way?
We would shift our teachers based on what they needed. So whether the teacher came into the building, if that were the scenario that you listed, we had 75% that wanted remote, we would basically split up our teachers. And like I said, we're going to assign a cohort of 15 students roughly to each. So whether they're teaching remote or whether they're teaching bricks and mortar, they would have a cohort. So I don't anticipate we would need additional teachers to accommodate that. As to the impact, we are, as soon as these computers we've ordered come in, we will be pretty much one-to-one student devices. So we may have some connectivity issues. We've purchased a bunch of hotspots for families that might not have internet access in preparation for that. But all of our staff members have a device to connect with, and all of our students will have something too. So I don't anticipate if more people go remote that we'll be, certainly we're going to be in a better position this year than we were in March when that happened. We've also looked at adding some software. We're going to be adding Zoom meetings to assist. We've had some issues with our Google that there were capacity issues sometimes. And so we're looking at a different sort of meeting software that will help our teachers a little bit better work with kids remotely. But yeah, the tech department has really been looking very carefully at what we have, what we need, what makes sense. Because as I said, we all fully expect that at some point, at least for some point of the year, we're going to have to just seamlessly go from bricks and mortar back to everybody.
And would it be the flip side, the same thing, if we had almost 100% of the kids decide to come back? Would that kind of mess things up as far as, the need for the equipment that we have?
Yeah, not the equipment, but I would say the staffing, because as I said, we do have some teachers who really we already have received information from their doctors that say that in this environment, it's not advisable for them to come back at this time. So we would work to accommodate those teachers, but we also are fortunate that we have a group of people who are tutors that don't actually have a classroom, but many of those people that serve as tutors also have a teaching credential. So we may be able to shift some of those people into the roles of instructional should that need arise. But based on what we've seen and what we expect and what we've heard from parents, we think that the 80-20 roughly is kind of where we're at right now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there a limit on what the buildings can accommodate in terms of maintaining that target 15 student class size? I mean, if 95% decide to come back, are we going to be able to accommodate that and still not have the rooms be jammed?
So I'm smiling. Excel nerd, self-declared Excel nerd. And one of the first things my operation group did We took the blueprints of the building. We did the math to figure out, divided by 36, because 6 times 6, that's per kid, divided our room spaces by that. Then we walked the facility and we measured any things that were in the room that were permanently attached, such as a bank of cabinets or countertops or whatever that couldn't serve as viable student seating. And then we recrunched our numbers. So we are very confident that we have plenty of space, even though we are going to have to create, we estimated 6 new classes at the elementary school in different grades, because certain class sizes would put us over that 15. We think we have plenty of space for that. We also, it may not be perfect space, it may not be ideal instructional space, but we do have some places in the cafeteria that we can wall off and create a couple different classrooms there. We can repurpose our art room, because the model we're looking at right now is it would be art on a cart, where basically the art teacher would be a pull-in rather than the kids going to the art room. So we do have some other flexibility within our buildings, but as far as the math works for every student right now. We are very, very fortunate. And I think when you've heard some of the other models that other districts are talking about, where they're doing like 2 days here, there, they're not in the great situation that we are, because I think they have larger classrooms and smaller, older facilities. So they're having to bring their kids back in stages and in groups, because they don't have the capacity we do. So we're really, really fortunate to have what we have in our facilities, and this building project that you guys did, everyone should be super proud of that. It's been a huge success, and how timely to have that completed in time for this situation.
Other questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Dave and Jana. We appreciate your time this evening. Let's move along to the...
Very nice to meet all of you. And again, thank you. I'm going to sign off for now, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you then.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll move along to the next item on the agenda. I wasn't perfectly sure how to frame this. I just knew that there was a strong desire to talk about it, but whether the budget committee should adopt a specific policy on the timing of submissions from the town and the school district, I guess something I'm personally in favor of, because we do need time to read and understand and process what we're getting to be able to react intelligently to it. On the flip side, however, I don't think we have any standing to demand it, other than to just say that, we're not going to be willing to consider anything that comes after a certain point when we make our decisions. But given that we're in the custom of meeting on Mondays, to say if we have something by the end of the day Friday, is that workable for everybody, or does anyone have a different suggestion on how we would word this?
I'm fine with it saying, at least 24 or 48 hours before, in case we don't meet on a Monday.
Fair enough.
And that's one thing. But then the other thing, on the other hand, I mean, last year there were a couple of times where we didn't get materials till the night of the actual meeting.
Right.
And I don't think we always, it's cast in stone that the budget committee has to meet on so many days before the election or the votes and sort of stuff. What happens if we don't get the materials, say on a Friday night? We can't cancel our meeting for that Monday, I don't think.
Yeah, and that's where, and I don't think we'd cancel the meeting, but that's where you kind of come back to the question of, all right, if push comes to shove, what are the teeth of this thing? Because I think most people who are part of the committee will recall the reason it was a town warrant article that we didn't get until the last minute. And the reason we didn't get it was because the council was having a public hearing on it that, there was a fair bit of dominoes falling in terms of the timing of when it could be the case. And that didn't make it any less frustrating, but the reasons for it, you know, I remember sitting there and scratching my head and in the end saying, well, I don't see how it can be any different, which was, you know, I mean, in this year, you know, what you'd really have to just insist on is everybody needs to be a little more on the ball in terms of getting their warrant articles approved and to us. But again, you know, the only alternative is we say, well, we're just not going to vote on it 48 hours in advance. Statutorily, I'm not even certain we can do that. And I don't, you know, I don't know where we could even get unvarnished advice on the topic, because we don't have a budget for an attorney. Only the town council and the school board have that.
Mhm.
So
Dan?
yeah, Rob.
Oh, I'm sorry. I heard a break there.
Yep.
We're really just asking as a courtesy not to drop big files on us at the last minute when we have other obligations. And so why don't we, I think since we brought that to everybody's attention, we've had a good bit more notice.
Yes.
Relative to the report. And so as a simple reminder, I mean, I as well just don't want to get this on Friday night and look forward to happy reading over the weekend. There's other things with family I'd love to do. Why don't we just ask as a courtesy, whether it's 2 or 3 business days prior to the meeting, to please the courtesy of supplying these reports. If it really becomes an issue, then if we don't have the information in enough time to consider it, to have a good discussion that's informed, then we'll have to table that. And I expect that we would vote that way, to table that if we had the time within the statute, because we wouldn't want to have an uninformed vote or discussion. And so if we made it more formalized just to a courtesy of 3 business days, I mean, heck, I think that's reasonable, right?
I don't disagree at all. I'm just trying to understand in my own mind. Something will eventually happen that breaks the mold. Maybe it won't happen this year, which, you know, would be great, but it will happen sooner or later. And, you know, at that point, I guess we choose to either accommodate it or we don't. But if we choose not to accommodate it, you know, I'm not sure what that means in practical legal terms.
It seems to me that we could request that it be given to us 3 days, business days in advance of our meeting. And in the unusual circumstance that is impossible timing, that can be put on the agenda, and the material received late at the discretion of the chairman.
Fair enough. That works for me as well. I mean, would anybody like to take a crack at drafting up the goes with this?
But I just want to say, I think 3 business days is asking a lot. Perhaps 2 would be better.
If we got the wording that surrounds the number down, then we can. I think coming to the number is a quick debate. I'm more interested in what people's thoughts are on the words that we would put around it.
I'll take a crack at it. I'll rip off what the school or the town has and
okay,
change it to budget committee. I'll take a shot at it.
As they say, plagiarism is the sincerest form of flattery. Okay. Any other?
What I'll do is I'll send that to you, Dan, and then you can send it to everybody else. And
perfect.
Okay.
That's what we shall do then. Any other comments on this topic before we move on? All right, hearing none. So we were going to have 2 discussions led by committee members this evening, but Eric was not available. So Joe had reached out to me about 3 weeks ago, I think, at this point, and Joe is acquainted with somebody who specializes in New Hampshire as far as sources and uses and the process that goes along with that, which becomes very important at tax rate setting time, because those revenues that we get from the state in one form or another, act as deducts from what we have to collect through taxation. So Joe, you want to give us a quick overview of the what we could have available here?
Yeah, okay. First of all, I want to make it clear that I'm talking for myself. I'm not talking for anybody in the budget committee. I'm not talking for the budget committee. I'm not talking for any political party, and I'm not talking for any specific agenda, okay? But and I suspect that all you guys do too, get a lot of questions from people or comments from people that property taxes are too high. And I basically turn around and tell them and say, if you take a look at your tax bill, 3/4 of your tax bill is related to school funding. So the state currently says that an adequate education, or providing an adequate education to a student in New Hampshire should cost $3,709. Okay. In Newmarket, where the school budget is 22 million, 23 million, and we have roughly 1,100 kids, Newmarket is close to $20,000 per student. Okay. Across the state, there isn't a single school district that pays less than $12,000 per student. Okay. So it's my opinion that reliance on property taxes for school funding is not sustainable in the long run. That all being said, what I'm proposing is I'd like to have something presented to the school committee, to the budget committee here. Basically, Patty Lovejoy, she's one of our state representatives. She has done this thing in the past where she talks about New Hampshire taxes. She calls it New Hampshire Taxes 101. But she talks about the different tax revenues that come into the state and where the money goes. I think that would be beneficial for the budget committee to understand, state funding. There's a second presentation that I'd like to pull together too for the budget committee. The governor and the legislature have formed a committee to look into school funding. And what I'd like to do is work with Mike Cahill, who's also one of our state reps, to put together something for the budget committee to talk about where that committee stands, what they're thinking an action is and where they're going with helping funding to the schools. So with the committee's permission here, I'd like to go ahead and set up a couple of presentations for the budget committee. One from Patty Lovejoy to talk about taxes, where the taxes come from and where they go, and the other to just talk about school funding and where it's going.
Okay, so just I guess one quick procedural thing. If more than half of us are going to do this, we'll actually have to notice an official meeting, which is no big deal. It just means we have to put that out there and make it available if the public wants to see it. Otherwise,
well, I'm suggesting it be that it be done at one of our meetings.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough. That works. Any thoughts, reactions?
Yeah, well, first of all,
I think it'd be great.
Yeah, thanks, Joe, for putting that together. Can you add one topic to it? And I know Mike Cahill's been working on it, and I don't know if Housemember Lovejoy's been working as well on this, but we jumped through all the hoops during this construction project to the schools to be eligible for state building back. Before the moratorium, districts were eligible for up to 30%, I think, or 33%. Newmarket would be eligible for something less than that because it's only one district, but it would be substantial. And, it's sort of an issue of fairness. We just missed the timing of it. There were a lot of, I know I'm originally from Concord, and I know Concord built a bunch of schools just before the moratorium. And it might have been actually more than 33%, actually, now that I'm thinking of it, but they got a big chunk of money. But it'd be kind of nice to know if they're still pursuing that, I went over and testified once a couple of years ago. I know Mike Cahill's been pushing it, but it'd be nice to get some money back.
Yeah, part of the thing I was thinking about on the thing with Mike would cover the building funding. How talk about, you know, the state did have money for school buildings, and then there was a moratorium, and we just happen to be building a new school, or, you know, doing the enhancements to the schools right at the time that they issued the moratorium, and, you know, so we kind of missed out there. But yeah, my intent was to, when I talk with Mike, to cover, you know, just make the budget committee aware of that, and at the same token that we're making the budget committee aware, it also makes the, you know, the people in Newmarket aware. Hope.
Yeah, it's something I know I'd like to understand better, how the state funding works and how others are working to try to change it. Roger?
Yeah, I think it would be very worthwhile to understand that a lot better, and certainly to understand the issues of school funding and where the state might be headed in that area.
Jeff?
I really like the idea of the presentations. I think, if anything, I found no matter how much I learn about how this works, there's so much more to understand that almost seems contradicting to what you already learned. So getting the best real picture from experts would be very valuable for all of us, no matter how long we've been on the committee. One of the things that I've wanted to do for the last few years, and I've never really found a good time to bring it up, sounds like maybe we're entertaining these kinds of things now, would be for us to do some sort of presentation on how Newmarket compares to other towns in the kinds of ways that Joe brought up, just so we can see the numbers and talk about them and see where the trends are going. It's something that I've done when reviewing the budgets myself for our work. But I've never had a way to like talk about it with others in the committee or with the public. So I think it would be interesting to try to, you know, dispel myths and, you know, get facts and like really understand where we are and where we're going, and then maybe be able to use that as facts that we can bring to our own meetings when we talk about the budgets coming forward.
Well, I mean, I think that's a great idea. There's so many, you know, you can come up with a comparison for our budget numbers to suit nearly any narrative that pleases you, depending on how you want to frame it. And it's, it would, at least personally, be interesting for me to understand that better, because, you know, people do spend a fair bit of effort trying to compare us to our peers, whether you want to call our peer group the Seacoast, whether you want to call our peer group towns under 10,000 in population, whether you want to call our peer group, you know, single town school districts. You know, there's about 6 or 7 perfectly valid ways you can cast Newmarket's peer group, and each of them, you know, comes with interesting insights and comparisons. So yeah, that also sounds good.
Even if one of the outcomes of is that folks on the committee or folks at home know where to go to get the data, because the data are all available on the government website, the state website. It's not always easy to find it, but it's
Right.
there, and it's, you know, very hard to use it probably and not fall into some narrative. But just being able to help folks self-service to understand where to go, that it is available if they want to spend time looking at it, and maybe what some of the numbers are, because a lot of the numbers that are public, you have to kind of have the presentations that we're talking about to understand what equalization ratios are and how, like, why they take out like power supply from the town when they do the calculations, like really obscure things that wouldn't be obvious. That in and of itself can help inform someone so that maybe everybody gets to know a little bit more about what we're doing on the committee and what we're subject to in the state. And then, like I said, can go and do their own analysis if they want to choose one set of comps or another set of comps. That's perfectly within their right.
Yep. No, it's a very good point. Like you said, the DOR website is a gold mine of obscure information that isn't easy to lay your hands on.
Well, just one thing on that, just on the DOE website for the committee's knowledge, they have a per pupil cost of every district in the state, and there's other data there. There's salary data. There's demographic trends, and there's a lot of stuff there. Some of that stuff requires unpacking, because it may not be apples to apples. There are different ways to report things, and it may be helpful, if I don't, not that I want to be adding things to folks' plates this fall in particular, but I'm sure somebody like a Dave Jack or Jana Mellon could peek behind those numbers and, for the committee, and make sure that we're comparing apples and apples, and when it comes time.
All right. So just as a reasonable next step, Joe, would you be interested in reaching out to Representative Lovejoy and Representative Cahill and just see what their availability would be? We know the Mondays. It'll be Monday, August the 31st is our next meeting. Monday, September the 28th, I believe, is the meeting after that. If any of those are workable times for them.
Yeah, I will talk to them. Again, I didn't want politics to get into this, but Patty is running for executive council, and I don't know. I was thinking in my mind we should wait till after the primaries. I don't know. Does anybody have?
Yeah, I hear you. Obviously, all we can do is ask, but in both cases, I guess my ask would be, this isn't a campaign event, and
yeah.
we don't want to get into a situation where it turns into one.
Right, and I don't want anybody thinking that that's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
So.
But everybody should at the same time should realize that, no different from us, our state reps are people that we rely on to get information, and it's probably not possible for that information to come with zero political bent to it, but to the extent we can minimize it.
I'm fine with it as long as nobody else looks at it that way.
Given our schedule, if we can do it in August and September, I hate to see us run into October, because then we're going to be working on real budget issues.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Is a is a canned type of thing. The question is she available that day? The other one, I don't know. I have to talk with Mike to see. There's a whole bunch of stuff out there.
Right. My gut feeling would be, just from knowing Mike to the extent that I do, if he's not in the midst of doing something else, he sometime once or twice has just showed up for one of our meetings to sit in the crowd. So he'd probably one date or the other would be able to be available.
Okay. All right. I'll shoot for those dates.
I'm sorry, I probably just made Mike sound like he has a very limited social life, which wasn't my intention at all. But very few people actually willingly come to our meetings. So, all right. I believe that is everything that we had on the written agenda for this evening. Does anybody have anything they'd like to bring up under other business?
Dan, I have a question.
Sure.
Just curious if the budget committee has ever put a number for the town and the school, saying, for example, we're looking for a 2% increase or a 3% increase, giving them some guidelines prior to them actually starting to build their budgets. Has that ever been attempted, or is it even part of our process?
In the years that I've been doing this, we've not attempted to set a guideline or an expectation like that. The general philosophy, right or wrong, has been that we want the town and the school district to come to us with a bottom-up budgeting exercise, and the debate is usually, having done that bottom-up exercise, how do we look in terms of the percentages and the other context. It's not to say that we couldn't go to them with a guideline, but then ultimately we'd still be faced with the same decision if they came back with, with the results of the bottom-up exercise that we normally do. Zach, did you have a comment or a?
I would just be mindful about treading down that territory in terms of the budget committee's actual responsibilities to the town. I don't know if that's listed, that we can provide them specific policy recommendations that we're expecting them to follow, or in a sense build their budgets around before they come to us.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember years prior to me being on the committee where, where proposals were thrown out that, let's just call this $100,000 and be done with it. I don't remember those being enacted, but, it's, I guess personally, I find a lot of value in the bottom-up exercise, which is not to say that I always agree with the numbers that come out of it, but I at least like to understand where the department heads, the town manager, and the council on that side of the fence, and the corresponding folks on the school district side, what they actually think is the right number to be at, and then it's for us to decide whether, again, I look at this just my own point of view, which not everyone may share, but there's two questions I feel like we need to answer. One, given the mission that's been defined by the council or by the board, is this the right number to carry out the mission? And two, just as an absolute fail-safe, is this something that the town can or cannot reasonably afford?
Well, I think, comments were made earlier this evening about, taxpayers looking for a break. They're obviously going to get a break this year, but we understand, or potentially they're going to get a break this year, and understandable that it's a one-time fix because of the revenues that are left over. But I would just hate to see a situation. I mean, I've got some property up in Milton, and I know Milton just went to a tax cap, which has really handcuffed the town itself, and I'm sure it will handcuff the school also. So I'm just looking at maybe we can set some guidelines and potentially have some good conversations prior to actually getting some of these numbers in front of us.
Any other comments or questions? Jeff?
In a sense, that's the kind of conversation that I thought we might be able to spur by looking at the data, necessarily to set expectations of where a budget should land, but so that we have some foreknowledge of the environment that we're in. Now, if COVID has changed everything, and it sounds like it's changed quite a few things, then maybe that's not as important because maybe the data don't really fit from past years, but we can at least, see what it was and try to make an assessment.
I would just add, if I could, I would think goes for the town side as well. I don't know how we could, as a budget committee, set a figure like that without knowing what the needs are. And I guess I'm agreeing with Dan that you got to you hear the bottom up approach, and then if the board or the committee doesn't feel something's needed, well, that's when you weigh in. But I just don't know how it would be an arbitrary number.
Roger, were you?
It seems to me that the school board and the town council are certainly spending a lot of time looking at mission and the needs against that mission. But the question is, who is looking at what is a reasonable expense level for the residents of the town? And I believe that they are maybe looking to us to influence that. If the town council comes back and says, well, here's what we think we need to do, and here are the needs, and you know, our budget's going to be up by 15%, and the school comes back and says, here's our mission and our needs, and you know, our school budget's going to be up by 20%. That's very nice. Both committees have looked at their needs, but who's looking at it from the town resident standpoint and saying, hey, you know, a 25% increase in our taxes just isn't going to work, folks. You know, what is a reasonable growth rate in the taxes? And if that doesn't raise enough, then maybe, you know, the part of the mission of the town needs to be to increase the taxable base. Maybe that needs to be added to their mission so that we can afford the things that they think we need to do.
This is a good conversation, but doesn't this all voting booth? I mean, each individual decides what's appropriate for them, and then collectively, you know, they make the decision once a need-based budget is presented to them. And again, whether it's on the town side or the school side, I think that's why you vote. You know, what may be affordable to one may not be affordable to others. And I said this when, just to give an example of this, and I said it repeatedly when we were proposing the bond years ago for the school. I said there could be people out there, and very reasonable people, who say, yeah, that's a good project and we should do it, but I'm going to vote against it because I just can't afford it. And that's fine, just so long as it's a need-based choice, you know, that we give people. And I think that's the function of, I see anyways, the function of this committee is to make sure that we're meeting needs. It's not always a mathematical formula, and it's not always precise, but that's why we have so many good heads on the committee to receive the information and bat that around. And to Jeff's point, you know, compare it to some sort of a baseline and other data. But I just think it comes down, people ought to be given the choice, given clear information, and then they vote on it. And they tell us as a community what the tax level ought to be.
Yeah, I'm not in any way trying to end the conversation, but you know, my point of view would be, yeah, if the town and the school came to us with an aggregate 25% tax increase, that's where I would feel like, yeah, we probably should step in as a budget committee and say, this just doesn't pass the test. But can I tell you whether the limit is 2% or 5% or 15%? No, I can't tell you that sitting here without understanding the thought process that's involved in coming in. And that's why I would struggle, I guess, knowing what I know, to put guidance in front of the council or the school board to say, you know, we're expecting thou to come back with not more than 2.5%, because, you know, I don't have the context to say whether I think 2.5% is a reasonable number or not. You know, again, that's to my mind, that's why we go through the exercise of building these budgets the way that we do, with that bottom-up approach. And then it's perfectly fair game through it and say, you know, this is a need and the right price that goes with it, but this over here is, yeah, I might buy into the idea of the need, but I don't buy into the number that the council has ascribed to fulfilling it. Or, you know, I don't think this is the right plan to get there, and I think the right plan is a lot cheaper. Or, God, I mean, in a worst case, I think the right plan is more expensive, and we're setting ourselves up for failure if we budget at this level. You know, I've had times over the past 5 years where I've thought that we've been lowballed, frankly, by, you know, by some of the budgets that I've seen. So again, personally, I don't give myself so much credit for understanding this, that I think I could tell somebody that I know the right number where they should come in. Any other comments?
I'll just add my 2 cents here, that in towns where they've done tax caps, or, you know, setting a specific line where, you know, the budgets can't go across this. Although it sounds nice on the surface, it's caused a lot of problems in the long run. I personally would not want to support setting some kind of limits to the school committee or the town. I'm sure that the school committee and the town side, they're going to work on coming up with the best reasonable budget that they can. And the budget committee's responsibility is to take a look at that and, you know, approve a bottom line number or vote it down.
Other comments? Anything else anybody would like to bring up under other business? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Thank you, Roger. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I think that was Jeff or John. I couldn't exactly tell, so I'll leave that as an exercise for Patricia to figure out. So we must do a roll call vote. Roger.
Aye. Aye.
Jeff. Jeff.
Aye.
Joe.
Aye.
Bob.
Yes.
Mike.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Zach.
Aye.
Mike L.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are unanimous and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.